So the scenery is not as good as it was in the initial installment of this story. Sorry, I don't have a lake and a really nice park over here on this side of where I live. Still muddy here. They got a leaking something or other over there, making a little mud hole. But yeah, this is the citrus orchards and oil wells direction of the ride. I mean, Hart Park and Ming Lake are really nice, but I don't want to go there every day. Let's go over this way and get hollered at by the power pole. Yeah, they have a power pole out here with a camera on it that senses motion. It's got a motion sensor on it. Now, as we could see coming off of the road there's no sign about no trespassing or anything like that. So, you know, danger! Danger, Will Robinson! Yeah, that oil well had kind of a squawk in it there. It didn't used to have. I've ridden past here, twice before? And I never noticed a squawk like that from that oil well. Anyway, we're just out riding. We're not bothering anybody. I'm not going to do any damage to their property. But anyway, yeah, we were talking about how I got started as the rocking horse guy. And so I decided that I would build my giant rocking horses out of plywood. Carved plywood. So, yeah, let's go see what's over here. I've never seen anything carved plywood before. It's not done very often. I don't know why. It's a great medium to work with. Strong. I mean, you can build any shape you want. I did a little bit of research on it. Like I said, the idea to build giant rocking horses out of plywood came to me in the shower. It turns out it wasn't a completely original thought. Been done before. But, so I did a little bit of research on carved plywood and found out, about the strength factors. And I knew about plywood being strong in certain directions. In other directions, like if you're trying to fold a piece of plywood, you're going to get some flex in that. But if you put enough pieces of it together, that flexibility disappears. So, you know, I'll do a little demonstration of it with a business card. In a minute here, after I get off of this area that obviously they would rather I wasn't here. But yeah, plywood has directional strength. It's strong in some directions. It's not in other directions. Put a bunch of pieces of it together. Those directions that it's not strong in, suddenly it becomes much stronger. Oh, I could have just gone out that way. Yeah, we'll go out this way. No biggie. Oh, is that this is the back side of the Orange Grove store. They used to have date shakes here, and I would come in every once in a while and get a date shake. Now, you can still go and buy the dates, and they have ground dates that you can mix into whatever type of, like just a regular vanilla shake and make yourself a date shake. Date shakes are really good. They're hard to find, which is why I was a little bit bothered by it when they stopped selling date shakes here. Kat and I used to come and get a date shake every once in a while. Now there's no place local doing date shakes. So every time we're in the Palm Desert area, we go past Shields Date Farms, we'll stop in and get a date shake there. But anyway, the plywood. So I took those. If you watched the previous episode of this series, I talked about having using the Breyer model horses for my models to design the horses after. And so the one that I talked about that I bought two of the exact same Breyer model, the Belgian, and I cut one up. Sliced it up, actually, would be more precise than cutting. I cut it in half, right down the middle, from top to bottom, forward to back. So you have the left side of the horse and the right side of the horse, if you can picture that. And then I put it in I don't have a mill, so I chucked it up in a drill press clamp and put a small grinding wheel in a drill press, and I set it up to grind off 17/100ths of an inch, which through some basic math I calculated, okay, this is how big I'm going to build the horse. This is how big the model is I'm starting with. The plywood was 1 1/8 of an inch thick, and I did the math and came up with 17/100ths of an inch was the thickness that I needed to grind off. And then I put the slightly smaller piece of, well, first I took, when I cut it in half, I took the left half and I put it on a sheet of graph paper, 1/4 inch graph. Hello. And I traced around it. That was piece number 0. Then after grinding off 17/100ths of an inch, I cleaned up the edges on that and put it onto another sheet of 1/4 inch graph paper and traced around it and labeled that L1. Put it back in the drill press, ground off another 17/100ths of an inch, put that on another sheet of graph paper and labeled that L2. So on and so forth. When the plastic dryer model was just a bunch of plastic dust on the floor, I had a stack of sheets of graph paper that combined were a set of plans. Now, a lot of people would have done this with a computer program or, computer assisted drafting or, whatever. I didn't have a computer that was that powerful, and I didn't know how to operate one of those programs. It didn't have the program, so I spent late nights out in the garage making my set of plans. Then you got to take the set of plans and enlarge them onto sheets of plywood. I did this by calculating the difference in size between 1/4 inch and the finished size of Vlad, and using the strings and straight edges and marking pens and so on, I drew a grid on the sheets of plywood. And then with a digital vernier caliper and calculator, I would transfer those points where my lines cross the grids. It's graphic enlargement. Pretty simple, but very time consuming. If you transfer all these points off of the grid paper onto the grid plywood, and then you take a pencil and you draw in, you connect the dots. Yeah, you can put in some smaller grids if you want to. It didn't have to be that accurate. Remember, I'm going to carve this. I'm basically, I always tried to err on the side of making things too big. Much easier to carve off excess wood than to carve wood back onto. Yeah, you can't do that. No, you don't want to cut it too small. You want to cut it too big and work your way down to correct. So when I got done, how many hours in the garage, late nights, had my stereo out there, and I'd come home from work. I would stop at fast food drive-through or wherever on my way home from work and get something for dinner. Come home, straight in the garage, work until midnight. Get up 4:30 in the morning, get in the car, stop at a fast food place and get a burrito for breakfast. And it was not a healthy lifestyle, but I spent all of my spare time in the garage, which is probably part of how I ended up being divorced. Anyway, that's not what this is about. So when I get all of these sheets of graph paper transferred onto the plywood, I take a jigsaw and I cut out along the lines that I've drawn on there, creating a whole bunch of weirdly shaped scraps of plywood, which I use to heat my home with my wood burning stove. And yeah, I know, Plywood is glued together with some rather toxic glue, especially when you burn it. But, I had a sealed wood stove. You weren't getting the smoke inside the house. And my neighbors are far enough away that they should be able to survive. And I end up with all these parts of horses stacked up along the wall. They were all numbered and indexed and how to put them together. And I thought, okay, now what I'll do is I'll start with sheet 0. That would be the one in the center. And I'll go with sheet L1, line it up, draw around it with a pencil draw around L1 onto 0, where it goes once I've got it all lined up with my index marks and everything. And then drill holes. Well, first I thought, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'll paint the glue onto sheet 0 with a paintbrush, just standard wood glue, and I'll clamp it all up. Well, the clamping was going to be kind of a pain to do. So I thought, no, wait a minute. Here's what I'll do. I'll drill holes about 3 inches in from the edges all the way around sheet L1, and I'll screw it down. And then the next day I can take those screws out and do the same process with sheet L2. The next day, take the screws out, sheet L3. Well, now when I went to pull the screws out after the next day on L1, I thought, wait a minute. I laid sheet L2 on there, and it covered up all those screws. So I thought, wait a minute. Why take those screws out? They're actually adding structure, they're adding strength, and they're adding backup and insurance to the glue joint. Left them in there. And did the same process with L2, L3. But instead of one sheet a day, which would take literally over a month to glue this horse together, I did it in 2 nights. Glued up the whole horse. Now the garage and the house I was living in there in Joshua Tree it didn't have a standard roof rafter system to it. It had some huge, like 6x12 beams exposed inside. That guy wasn't supposed to come this way. He was supposed to turn right like everybody else does. You dummy, you screwed up my plans here. So anyways, I get it all put together, and I could throw a strap, a heavy strap, over one of those 6x12s, and then use a come along with another strap to wrap around the horse, and I could pick it up and flip it and things like that. Because by this time it's way too heavy for me to be able to pick it up by hand. Vlad is very heavy. In his finished form, ready to rock, he's 714 pounds. I didn't know what I was doing. Again, I'm not a woodworker. I'm not a carpenter. I had no idea what I was doing. I could have removed a lot more wood from the inside and still been very, very strong. But I didn't know that. I didn't yet fully understand the strength factor of a sheet of plywood. So Vlad is a lot heavier, and there's no way to get back inside and remove that excess weight. He's not able to be taken apart and worked on. He is one big beefy piece of plywood, hollow but very strong. There's no flex in Vlad. So I took my pieces of 4x6 that I had set up as I was putting it together. You see, I keep getting ahead of myself. As I was putting it together, I installed 12-inch long, half-inch diameter bolts into the legs with the right amount sticking out so that I could run those bolts through holes drilled into the cross beams that would attach his feet to the rockers. Now, one of the big, the thing that showed me the mistake in the design of the original rocking horses was when one of the bolts that held the cross members onto the rockers on one of the old original rocking horses broke. To get in front of the camera here to show you this, okay? So I'm going to find a spot to pull over here, get off the road, and show you how the original rocking horses rockers were attached to the cross beams that the feet were bolted to. So I'm going to pull over right here. Okay, no, I'm not going to keep my mug down here in the way. I'm just going to stand up and show you. Let's say you've got the beam that the legs are bolted to, and you've got a wooden rocker over here. Now, in the original 3 giant rocking horses, that guy that built them, he just drilled holes through the plywood rockers, put them up against the end of that crossbeam, and put 2 lag bolts, like 3/8-inch lag bolts, through there. Now, if you picture this, the entire weight of the horse, the rockers, me jumping up and down on there, making them rock and all of that, is all on those bolts. Not a good idea, okay? Had one of those bolts break one time. I heard it snap and had to shut the horse down until I could get that bolt replaced. Now, when I decided to build mine, I said, okay, here's one major improvement we're going to make. My horses are bigger and heavier. This isn't going to work. So I took my rocker, which is 3 thicknesses of plywood, and on the inner 2 thicknesses of plywood, I cut out the shape of that cross member. Drilled the holes in the outer piece, so you put that cross member actually into the rocker and bolt it on. So those bolts are, they're not holding the weight. They're just keeping the rocker from falling off. There's no shear force on those bolts. The horse and the cross members are supported by the inside of that notch that I cut in the plywood. That's one of the things that I engineered to make mine better and stronger than the old ones. It's a pretty simple thing. Don't put a 3/8 lag bolt under that kind of force. So anyway, yeah, when I ended up selling those the old, and that's a whole nother story. The original rocking horses got sold to Tom Wilson of Corona Renaissance Fair, and I told him, don't let people ride these. They're not safe. Well, he did, and I mean, he had them on display, just a static display for a while, I guess. But then he started letting people ride them. I told him not to do that. And thankfully, nobody got hurt. But it could have happened. And I would hate to see somebody get hurt while they're out having fun riding a giant rocking horse. But anyway, that's one of the things that I did. The original rockers were two sheets of plywood thick. Mine are 3 because they're supporting a lot more weight. And excuse me. Mine are built very strong. They're not coming apart. The process of gluing the plywood sheets together and then holding them together with screws instead of a giant clamping system and leaving the screws in there, that's a process that, since I came up with it myself, and I'm sure there's other people that have done it, but I didn't know about them, so yeah, I came up with it myself. And since I came up with it myself, I got to name it. It's called Glued and Screwed. So one of the really fun parts when you're out at an event with having giant hand-carved plywood rocking horses, a lot of people will see the horses and go, wow, that was a lot of work putting all that plywood together and carving it. And I'm like, smiling and nodding my head, yes, it was. Thank you very much for realizing how much work I put into this. And I had a lot of like old wood carving guys. They look at it and they watch me taking people for rides, and they're like, wow, you know, if I had to put that much effort, that much work, that many hours into building something like that, I sure wouldn't let somebody ride it the way you guys do. And I'm like, well, that would defeat the purpose of my having built it. That's what I built it for. I'm not going to just build them and, you know, bring them in the living room as if you could get them into a living room. And maybe if you've got sliding glass doors, which I actually have gotten them through sliding glass doors into buildings and like that. But you know, they're not going to go in through a normal door. It's not going to just sit in the living room and be a piece of furniture. These were built to ride, and they're going to be ridden. That's what it's all about, making people smile. And so, like I say, a lot of people recognize that they're plywood because you can see it. You can see all the layers in the plywood because I didn't paint them. They're Vlad is finished with a spar varnish, which is a pretty tough stuff. I mean, it tolerates a lot of abuse. And Freya is finished with a Minwax product called Polyshades. Not quite as tough as spar varnish, but it does a good job. Kind of weatherproofs them, and I'm assuming that these the beehives here that I just rode past are not being used because there's no bees. When I saw them from a distance, I thought, oh, beehives. But when I go by there, I'm probably going to get, the bees don't cause you problems unless you cause them problems. But I thought, oh, I'm going to be riding through a swarm of bees there. But there's no bees around, so I'm guessing that there's none in those hives. The hives are dead. You don't see any bees swarming around them. So that's Highway 58 right there. And off in the distance, that's the railroad tracks. You got a train full of tank cars heading east towards Barstool. Oh, I'm sorry, Barstow. Excuse me. But see, with all the people that recognize that the horses are made out of plywood, when you're at an event, there's always people that don't recognize. And I don't expect everybody to recognize plywood, especially when it's carved. I mean, most people have never seen carved plywood. But the one day, it was in the first year that I was traveling around with my horses. We were at Folsom Renaissance Fair, and this lovely lady, she was confused, and she asked me, where did you get that giant piece of wood? And it was like the plywood gods sent down a smart-ass answer to me, and they installed it in my head and walked away after dropping the microphone. And I repeated it to the lady, and it just came out of nowhere. I hadn't thought about it. It just, I'm up there in my kilt and my big sleeve shirt and all that. And I stood at the front of the stage, and I looked at the lady straight in the eye, and I said, well, my lady, what we do, we go directly to the forest in southwestern Ecuador, and we purchase the entire trunk of a plywood tree. Yes, the plywood tree. Most of the people that were standing around there laughed, but that lady did not laugh. I expected her to laugh like everybody else, but she didn't. And the thought process going on in my mind, I was like, she believes me. Oh my God. She bought that story. I got to keep this going. So I actually physically looked up into the sky and pleaded with the plywood gods out loud. I said, she believed me. You got more? Sure enough, they planted the rest of the story in my head. Out of nowhere, this entire story just showed up in my head. I can't explain it. And I looked back to the lady again with a completely straight face, and I said, oh yes, the plywood tree. Now, you've probably never seen a plywood tree, have you? And she said, no, I don't think I have. I said, yeah, most people haven't. It's not a very pretty tree. Nobody's going to have one in their front yard. The rest of the crowd is starting to snicker a bit here, and I'm making eye contact with them, and we're having fun. It's not a very pretty tree. Nobody's going to have one in their front yard. It doesn't give good shade. The fruit's terrible. The monkeys won't even eat it. Yeah, the plywood tree fruit. Uh huh. So, and the story just keeps on coming. Now you see the plywood tree, it only gets about 8 feet tall as I'm holding my right hand up in the air. And I look out at the rest of the people that know I'm absolutely so full of it that my eyes are brown. They're actually hazel, which would be a nice shade of crap, I guess. And they're they're like, you can see they're shaking their heads. They're like, oh my God, no. He's not gonna say 4 feet wide. And I nodded my head and held my hands about 4 feet apart, and I said, and 4 feet wide. This lady's just buying the whole story. It was beautiful. And you can't blame somebody. The knowledge of how plywood is made, that it, even that it's a manufactured product, is it's not part of most people's life. It's not something that they think about. It's not something they need to worry about. So why would they know? It just doesn't matter in their life. Um, so yes, 8 feet tall and 4 feet wide. As it gets older, it gets thicker. And I turned towards Vlad and I pointed at the front of his chest there, where you can clearly see all the layers in the plywood. And I said, now if you count the growth rings in this one here, yes, the growth rings in the plywood, you can see that this was 176 years old when we cut it down. No trespassing. At the angle that that sign's at, that would indicate to me that there's no trespassing into that field. It's not for the road going to the left. It's not for the road going straight. But I don't want to attract attention to myself. And I'm not out here to get in trouble. 176 years old it was when we cut it down. Now the trick is, when you go to the plywood forest in southwestern Ecuador, yes, that's where they grow the plywood trees. That's what they have the monkeys there that won't eat the fruit. If you go to the plywood forest in southwestern Ecuador, and if you're going to build something this big out of it, what you want to do is you get a hold of that trunk of the plywood tree. Yes, the trunk of the plywood tree. And you got to get it before they slice it up into them little skinny pieces. The little skinny pieces like you see in the hardware store. Otherwise, it would take me months to glue it all back together and make a rocking horse out of it. She walked away believing that entire story. I thought it was just absolutely beautiful. I'm going to have to bring my drone out here sometime soon and take a flight off to my right here. I can see it from here. I'm not even going to bother pointing the camera there. It's too far away. This camera won't get it. But there's what looks like an oil well boneyard out there by some old dead grape vineyards. where they butt up against the solar farm. I want to go take a look at the oil well boneyard. Anyway, yeah, everybody else was laughing. This lady believing every word of it. You know, and after the first thing I said about the entire trunk of the plywood tree, the rest of the crew is looking at me and they're like, "What?" Turn to them and hush, telling the lady about the plywood tree. You remember, southwestern Ecuador. Every single day when I'm at an event, I have somebody ask that question, and I tell the story, and they believe me. I don't know what to say. I told my brother's girlfriend at the time. I told her the story up in Washington, and she believed me. And like I say, it's not really that surprising that people believe that story. The truth about how plywood is made is just not part of their life experience. I told her the story. She believed me. Later on that night, we're all having dinner, and I told her, I said, you know, there's no such thing as a plywood tree. And she she starts arguing to prove the story. She's arguing with me. Oh, sure. All right, so where do they get plywood then? And plywood is a manufactured product. You can make it from all sorts of different trees. There's walnut plywood, there's pine plywood, there's yeah, the rocking horse number 3, if I ever finish building them, is made out of Italian poplar plywood. Very light, very strong, very expensive. But I told her basically how plywood is made, which is a pretty wild story when you think about it. And she was nodding her head. Uh-huh, right. They make the plywood out of trees. Uh-huh. I, I grabbed my phone. I searched YouTube for how to make plywood. And there's videos on there on the process of making plywood. She's like, uh-huh, yeah, yeah. No, like this is all part of a conspiracy to convince her that there's no such thing as a plywood tree. You probably shot that video yourself, didn't you? No, I don't have that kind of equipment to make a video of. Here's a piece of old historic stuff right here. That's the way oil wells used to look, with a beam of wood instead of iron, which gives you some kind of idea how strong wood is if you use it in the right way. Now, if you replicated those beams, those wooden beams out of plywood, and had the plies standing vertical and lengthwise to that beam, the industry standard to use for calculating how much stronger that would be than a regular piece of wood is 7 times stronger than those pieces of wood. But obviously those pieces of wood there were strong enough to get the job done that they needed done. It's pretty cool that they have that out here. There's a couple other old oil wells out here on display at the edge of the road. I get some video of those when I run across them. I don't remember where they are. I just know I've seen them out here. So yeah, as far as I know, my brother's ex-girlfriend still believes in the plywood tree. Yeah. The fun we have at Renaissance fairs, telling people lies and getting them to believe it. It's almost as much fun as putting them on the rocking horse and taking them for a ride. Just a different way of taking them for a ride. Yeah, the plywood tree. I thank the plywood gods profusely for planting that idea in my head. I've had a lot of fun with it over the years, and I will continue to have fun with it. I might even teach the story to whoever buys my rocking horses so they can have fun. Because the tradition should carry on. Am I right? So anyway, that's the story of the plywood rocking horses. And I've seen other giant rocking horses made out of plywood. A lot of them even more beautiful than mine. There are some serious craftsmen out there building rocking horses. Beautiful woodworking. I am not one of those people. I don't even know if I have the capability in me, if I was to work at it, to even learn how to be a master woodworker. Some of the stuff that I see woodworkers make, it blows me away. Wood worked by somebody who knows what they're doing is just absolutely beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. So anyway, that's my story for today. If you're still here listening, thank you and bless you. Yeah. Enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are. Thank you for watching my video, listening to my stupid stories. I got a lot more stories about the rocking horses, and we will continue this series of silly Renaissance fair stories. And then maybe I'll get off into some other stories, because the story about how my right leg became 2 inches shorter than my left leg and has cow arteries in it and stuff like that. I got stories. Maybe you want to listen to them, maybe you don't. Whatever. But thanks for being here. Like, subscribe, share. Yeah, tell a friend that you know somebody who's just out here telling goofy stories while he's riding around on an electric bicycle. Yeah, maybe someday I'll get rich. I doubt it, but stranger things have happened.